Picture this. You are a teenager, maybe 15 or 16 years old, and soldiers have just dragged you out of your home. Your city is burning. The temple your people built for God, the center of everything you have ever known, is being looted by foreign troops. And now you are walking, day after day, across hundreds of kilometers of scorching desert, chained to other captives, heading toward a city you have never seen. You do not know if you will ever come back. You do not know what they plan to do with you when you get there. That is how Daniel's story begins. Not with glory, not with miracles. It starts with loss, fear, and a long walk into the unknown. And yet, this young man, this teenager, ripped away from everything familiar, would go on to advise the most powerful kings on earth, interpret dreams that baffled every wise man in the empire, and survive a night locked in a pit full of hungry lions. His story stretches across decades, across the rise and fall of entire empires, and it all starts with a simple, stubborn decision to stay faithful to God when every reason in the world told him to give up. So let us go back to where it all began. It was the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and Jerusalem was in trouble. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had brought his army to the gates of the city. Babylon at that time was the superpower of the ancient world. Their army was massive, well-equipped and battle-hardened. Jerusalem, by comparison, was a small kingdom caught between larger powers. The siege did not last long. The scriptures tell us that God allowed Jerusalem to fall. Jehoiakim was delivered into Nebuchadnezzar's hands, and the Babylonians carried off some of the sacred vessels from the temple, the house of God, and brought them to the temple of their own gods in Babylon. It was a devastating blow, not just militarily but spiritually. The treasures of God's house were now sitting in a pagan temple. But Nebuchadnezzar did not just take gold and silver, he also took people. Among the captives marched out of Jerusalem were some of the brightest young men from the royal family and the nobility. These were not random prisoners. Nebuchadnezzar had a very specific plan for them, and one of those young captives was Daniel. Now, we do not know exactly how old Daniel was when he was taken. The text describes him and the others as young men, and based on the qualifications Nebuchadnezzar demanded, scholars generally estimate Daniel was somewhere between 13 and 17 years old, a teenager. Old enough to understand what was happening, young enough that his entire life was being redirected by forces completely outside his control. The journey from Jerusalem to Babylon would have covered roughly 900 miles, following the trade routes along the Euphrates River. Weeks of walking through barren landscapes, sleeping on open ground, wondering what waited at the end. For a young man raised in the courts of Jerusalem, raised in the worship of the God of Israel, this march into exile must have felt like the end of everything. But it was actually the beginning. Try to imagine what it must have been like for Daniel walking into Babylon for the first time. This was not some dusty frontier town. Babylon was one of the most spectacular cities the ancient world had ever produced. Massive walls surrounded the city, so thick that chariots could race along the top of them. The Ishtar Gate, covered in brilliant blue glazed bricks and decorated with images of lions and dragons, towered over anyone who entered. There were hanging gardens, towering ziggurats, and palaces that stretched across entire city blocks. For a teenager from Jerusalem, it must have been overwhelming, but also terrifying, because this was not a visit. This was captivity. Daniel was not a tourist. He was a prisoner in a foreign land, surrounded by people who worshipped different gods, spoke a different language, and lived by completely different rules. And that is where things got interesting. Nebuchadnezzar gave an order to Ashpenaz, the chief of his court officials. The king wanted a selection of the best young men from among the captives, specifically from the royal family and the nobility. He had very precise requirements. These young men had to be physically fit, good-looking, intelligent, well-educated, and quick learners. The king wanted young men who could be trained to serve in the royal palace. But there was something deeper going on here. Nebuchadnezzar was not just looking for assistance, he was running a cultural conversion program. His plan was to take these Jewish youths, strip away their identity, immerse them in Babylonian language, literature, and customs for 3 years, and turn them into loyal Babylonians. He wanted to erase who they were and remake them in his own image. One of the first things that happened was that Daniel and his friends were given new names. Daniel, whose Hebrew name means God is my judge, was renamed Belteshazzar, a name honoring the Babylonian god Bel. His friend Hananiah, whose name means the Lord shows grace, became Shadrach. Mishael, meaning who is what God is, became Meshach. And Azariah, meaning the Lord helps, became Abednego. In each case, a name that pointed to the God of Israel was replaced with a name tied to Babylonian deities. This was deliberate. Names carried deep meaning in the ancient world. Changing someone's name was a way of claiming authority over them, of rewriting their story. Nebuchadnezzar was saying, in effect, you belong to Babylon now. Your old identity is gone. To drive the point home even further, the king assigned them food and wine from his own royal table. On the surface, this looked like a generous privilege. The best food in the empire straight from the king's kitchen. But for Daniel, it was a trap. Here is the thing. The food from Nebuchadnezzar's table almost certainly violated Jewish dietary laws. The meat may not have been prepared according to kosher standards. The wine may have been dedicated to Babylonian gods before being served. For a faithful Jew, eating this food would mean breaking the covenant with God. Now put yourself in Daniel's shoes for a moment. You are a captive in a foreign land. You have no power, no influence, no leverage whatsoever. The king of the most powerful empire on earth has offered you food from his own table. Refusing that offer is not just rude, it is potentially dangerous. You could be punished, you could be killed. And honestly, who would blame you for just going along with it? You are a prisoner. You did not ask for any of this. But Daniel made a decision. The scriptures say that Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. He made up his mind. This was not a casual preference. This was a firm, deliberate choice to honor God, even when it cost him something. What happened next shows us something about Daniel's character that goes beyond simple stubbornness. He did not make a scene. He did not stand up in the dining hall and give a speech about religious freedom. Instead, he went to Ashpenaz, the chief official, and asked respectfully and privately for permission to abstain from the king's food. Ashpenaz liked Daniel. The scriptures say God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But Ashpenaz was also scared. If these Jewish youths ended up looking worse than the other young men who were eating the royal food, the king would notice, and Ashpenaz's head would be on the line. Literally. So Daniel made a proposal. He went to the guard who had been assigned to watch over him and his 3 closest friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and suggested a test. "Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink for 10 days, Daniel said. After 10 days, compare how we look with the young men who eat the royal food, and then decide what to do." It was a reasonable, measured request. Daniel was not demanding. He was not aggressive. He simply asked for a chance to prove that his way would work. The guard agreed. For 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends ate only vegetables and drank only water. Meanwhile, everyone else feasted on the finest food the Babylonian Empire had to offer. And after those 10 days, the result was clear. Daniel and his friends looked healthier and better nourished than all the young men who ate the royal food. It was not even close. The guard was so impressed that he took away the royal food and wine from their diet permanently and gave them vegetables instead. This might seem like a small victory, a dietary choice. But it was so much more than that. In his very first test in Babylon, Daniel had drawn a line. He showed that he could live in a foreign culture, participate in its education, learn its language, and serve its government, all without compromising his core beliefs. He found a way to be faithful without being confrontational. That balance, that wisdom, would define the rest of his life. Over the next 3 years, Daniel and his friends threw themselves into their education. They studied Babylonian language, literature, astronomy, mathematics, and every other subject the Chaldean scholars could teach them. And the scriptures tell us something remarkable. God gave these 4 young men knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel, in particular, received a special gift: the ability to understand visions and dreams of all kinds. When the 3 years of training were complete, all the young men were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar for evaluation. The king personally interviewed them, and the results were striking. Among all the trainees, no one could match Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The king found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. 10 times. Not slightly better, not a little sharper, 10 times wiser than the best minds Babylon had to offer. As a result, all 4 of them entered the king's service. Daniel, the teenager who had arrived in Babylon as a captive, was now working directly for the most powerful ruler on earth. His faithfulness to God had not held him back. It had propelled him forward. But the real test was still coming. One night, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, not an ordinary dream. This one shook him to his core. He woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding, absolutely certain that this dream meant something critically important. There was just one problem. He could not remember it. Or, depending on how you read the text, he did remember it but wanted proof that his advisors actually had supernatural knowledge and were not just making things up. Either way, Nebuchadnezzar summoned every magician, enchanter, sorcerer, and astrologer in Babylon. The throne hall was packed with the most educated, most respected wise men in the empire, and the king dropped a bombshell on them. "Tell me what I dreamed," he said, "and then tell me what it means." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that throne hall. Every magician, every enchanter, every astrologer in the room knew they were in trouble. They had spent their careers offering interpretations of dreams people told them about. That was their skill. They could take a dream narrative and spin a plausible meaning from it. But this? The king was asking them to read his mind first and then interpret what they found there. "Your Majesty," the wise men replied, "if you tell us the dream, we will interpret it." But Nebuchadnezzar was not having it. "No," he said, "you tell me the dream and the interpretation. If you cannot, I will have every one of you cut to pieces and your houses turned into rubble. But if you can tell me the dream and its meaning, you will receive gifts and great honor." The wise men tried again. "There is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks," they protested. "No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. That was the wrong answer." Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered the execution of every wise man in Babylon, every single one, and that included Daniel and his friends. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, came to carry out the executions, Daniel responded with something that, given the circumstances, is almost hard to believe. He stayed calm. The scriptures say he spoke to Arioch with wisdom and tact, not panic, not anger, wisdom and tact. Daniel asked Arioch why the king's decree was so urgent. When Arioch explained the situation, Daniel went directly to the king and asked for time. "Give me a chance," Daniel said, "and I will interpret your dream." Then Daniel went home, gathered Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they did the only thing they could do. They prayed. They pleaded with God to reveal the mystery of the king's dream so that they and all the other wise men in Babylon would not be executed. That night God answered. In a vision, the dream and its meaning were revealed to Daniel, and Daniel's first response was not to rush to the king. His first response was worship. "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever," Daniel prayed. Wisdom and power belong to him. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. The next morning Daniel went to Arioch and told him not to execute the wise men. Then he was brought before the king. Standing before Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man in the world, Daniel began by making something absolutely clear. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, Daniel said. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Daniel was not taking credit. He was pointing the king's attention upward. Then Daniel described the dream. You saw a great statue, Your Majesty, a statue enormous and dazzling standing before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this statue was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly baked clay. While you watched, Daniel continued, a stone was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces at the same time, and they became like chaff on a threshing floor in summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the stone that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar sat there, probably with his mouth open, because Daniel had just described the dream exactly as it had happened. Then came the interpretation. The head of gold, Daniel explained, represented Nebuchadnezzar himself and his Babylonian empire. You are the King of Kings, Daniel told him. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. But after Babylon, another kingdom would arise, represented by the silver, inferior to Nebuchadnezzar's. After that, a third kingdom of bronze would rule over the whole earth. A fourth kingdom, strong as iron, would break and crush all the others. But this fourth kingdom would be divided, partly strong and partly brittle, like iron mixed with clay. And the stone cut without human hands. That, Daniel said, represented a kingdom that the God of heaven would set up. A kingdom that would never be destroyed. A kingdom that would crush all the others and bring them to an end, but would itself endure forever. The effect on Nebuchadnezzar was dramatic. The king fell face down on the ground before Daniel, the most powerful man on earth bowing before a Jewish exile. Surely your God is the God of gods, the king declared, and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries. As a reward, Nebuchadnezzar promoted Daniel to ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of the kingdom. And Daniel, showing the loyalty to his friends that marked his entire life, requested that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be appointed to positions of authority in the province as well. The captive had become the governor. But Nebuchadnezzar was a complicated man. Hearing that he was the head of gold apparently went to his head, because sometime later the king ordered the construction of a massive golden statue. Not a statue with a gold head and silver chest and bronze belly. An entirely gold statue. 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, covered in gold, set up on the plain of Dura. The king then issued a decree. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the golden image. Anyone who doesn't fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So the music played, and across the plain, thousands of officials, governors, and administrators dropped to the ground in worship. But 3 men did not bow. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel's closest friends, refused to worship the statue. Some Babylonian officials noticed and were only too happy to report them to the king. Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He summoned the 3 men and gave them one more chance. But their response was extraordinary. King Nebuchadnezzar, they said, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Read that again. Even if he does not, they were not bargaining with God. They were not saying, we will be faithful because we know God will save us. They were saying, we will be faithful regardless of what happens. That is faith without conditions. Nebuchadnezzar, now beyond furious, ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. The fire was so intense that the soldiers who threw the 3 men into the furnace were killed by the heat. But then something happened that made the king leap from his throne. Looking into the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar saw not 3 but 4 figures walking around in the flames, completely unharmed. The 4th, the king said, looked like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar rushed to the opening of the furnace and called out to the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. They walked out of the fire. Every official, governor, and administrator crowded around them. Not a hair on their heads was singed. Their clothes were not scorched. There was not even the smell of smoke on them. Nebuchadnezzar, shaken to his core, issued a new decree. No one in his kingdom could speak against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because no other God could rescue like this. Now, Daniel himself was not in the furnace. The text does not tell us where he was during this episode, but the experience of his 3 friends would have reinforced everything Daniel already believed. Their God was real, their God was present, and their God could protect his people even in the middle of fire. Time passed. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was at its peak. Babylon dominated the known world, and the king sat at the center of it all. And then he had another dream. This time the king remembered the dream, but none of his wise men could interpret it. So once again, Daniel was called in. Nebuchadnezzar addressed Daniel by his Babylonian name, Belteshazzar, and said something revealing. I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. The king described his dream. He saw a great tree, enormous and strong, growing until it reached the heavens. Its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant. Animals found shade beneath it, and birds nested in its branches. It fed every living thing. But then a messenger, a holy one, came down from heaven and cried out in a loud voice, "Cut down the tree! Trim off its branches, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump, bound with iron and bronze, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals for 7 times. Daniel listened, and his face changed. The scriptures say he was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts alarmed him. Nebuchadnezzar noticed the shift and encouraged Daniel. "Do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you," Daniel replied with genuine compassion. "My lord, I wish this dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries." Then he told the king the truth. The great tree, Daniel said, was Nebuchadnezzar himself. His greatness had grown, reaching to the heavens, and his dominion extended to the ends of the earth. But the decree of the Most High had gone out against the king. Nebuchadnezzar would be driven away from people and would live with the wild animals. He would eat grass like an ox. 7 periods of time would pass over him until he acknowledged that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Daniel then did something that showed his genuine care for the king, despite everything. He gave advice. "Therefore, your majesty, accept my counsel. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue." It was a bold thing to say to an absolute monarch. Daniel was essentially telling the king to change his ways. But he said it with respect, and he said it because he cared. Unfortunately, Nebuchadnezzar did not listen. 12 months later, the king was walking on the roof of his royal palace, looking out over the vast city he had built. "Everything I see, I built," the king thought. "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you." Immediately the prophecy was fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar was driven away from people. He ate grass like an ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of the appointed time, Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes toward heaven, and his sanity was restored. He praised the Most High, and his throne and splendor were returned to him. The king, who once boasted of his own greatness, now declared that the Most High is sovereign, and everything he does is right. Once again, Daniel's interpretation proved accurate down to the last detail. And once again, the power of God was demonstrated through Daniel's words. Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar died, and the throne of Babylon eventually passed to Belshazzar. The new king did not share his predecessor's hard-won respect for the God of Israel. Nebuchadnezzar had learned his lessons the hard way through madness and humiliation, and had come out of those experiences with a genuine acknowledgement of God's sovereignty. Belshazzar had watched none of that firsthand. He had inherited power without inheriting wisdom. One night, Belshazzar threw a great banquet for 1,000 of his lords. This was not a quiet dinner. This was a massive display of wealth, power, and excess. 1,000 of the kingdom's most powerful officials, all gathered in one hall, drinking and celebrating. The wine flowed freely, and as the evening wore on and Belshazzar's judgment blurred, he made a decision that would prove fatal. He ordered his servants to bring out the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem decades earlier. These were sacred objects, crafted specifically for the worship of God, set apart and consecrated for that sole purpose. They were never meant to be drinking cups at a pagan feast. Now Belshazzar and his guests drank wine from them while praising their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. It was an act of deliberate disrespect. Belshazzar knew what these vessels were and where they came from. He chose to use them anyway, as a display of contempt for the God of Israel. What happened next froze every person in that banquet hall. The fingers of a human hand appeared and began writing on the plaster of the wall, right next to the lampstand, where everyone could see it. The king watched the hand as it wrote, and the color drained from his face. His knees buckled. His legs gave way beneath him. Belshazzar screamed for his wise men. "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple, given a gold chain, and made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." But no one could read it. The wise men came and went. None of them could make sense of the mysterious words on the wall. Then the Queen Mother stepped in. She remembered Daniel. "There is a man in your kingdom," she told Belshazzar, "in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the time of your predecessor, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. He can interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel." Daniel, by now an elderly man, was brought before the king. Belshazzar offered him the same rewards: purple robes, a gold chain, third highest position in the kingdom. Daniel's response was characteristic. "You can keep your gifts and give your rewards to someone else," he said, "but I will read the writing for you." Before interpreting the message, Daniel did something bold. He reminded Belshazzar of what had happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He recounted how God had given Nebuchadnezzar greatness and glory, how the king had become arrogant, how God had humbled him, and how Nebuchadnezzar had eventually acknowledged the sovereignty of the Most High. Then Daniel turned his gaze directly on Belshazzar. "But you, Belshazzar, his descendant, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand, but you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Then Daniel read the writing on the wall. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. This is what they mean, Daniel said. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parsin, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, Belshazzar was killed, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. The Babylonian Empire, the head of gold from Nebuchadnezzar's dream, had fallen, and Daniel, who had served faithfully through it all, now faced a new chapter under new rulers. The transition from Babylonian to Medo-Persian rule was a seismic shift. Everything changed. The government, the power structure, the people in charge. Everything except Daniel. King Darius reorganized his new empire and appointed 120 satraps to govern the various provinces. Over these satraps, he placed 3 administrators to hold them accountable. Daniel was one of these 3. But Daniel did not just blend in with the other 2 administrators. The scriptures say he distinguished himself above them all by his exceptional qualities. He was so capable, so trustworthy, so effective that the king planned to place him in charge of the entire kingdom. And that is when the trouble started. The other administrators and satraps were furious. A Jewish exile, a man from a conquered nation, was about to be promoted above all of them. They could not stand it. So they began looking for something, anything, they could use against Daniel. They investigated his administration. They looked for corruption. They searched for negligence. They examined every decision he had made, every document he had signed, every order he had given. They found nothing, absolutely nothing. The scriptures say they could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Think about that for a moment. Daniel had been in government service for decades, through the reigns of multiple kings, across the fall of one empire and the rise of another. And after all that time, after all those years of holding power and making decisions, his enemies could not find a single thing wrong with his record. Finally, the conspirators came to a conclusion. We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel, they admitted, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. So they changed tactics. If they could not find a flaw in Daniel's conduct, they would manufacture a conflict between his duty to the king and his devotion to God. The conspirators went to King Darius with a carefully crafted proposal. They said that all the administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors had agreed that the king should issue a decree. For the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to the king should be thrown into the lion's den. There were several layers of deception in this request. First, they claimed that all the administrators agreed. That was a lie. Daniel, the most distinguished of the administrators, obviously had not agreed to this. Second, they appealed to Darius's ego, suggesting he should be the sole object of petition for an entire month. Third, and most importantly, they invoked the law of the Medes and Persians. Under this legal tradition, once a king signed a decree, it could not be revoked, not even by the king himself. Darius, flattered and unaware that this was a trap aimed at Daniel, signed the decree. When Daniel learned that the decree had been signed, what did he do? He went home. He went upstairs to his room where the windows faced toward Jerusalem. He knelt down and he prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. That last phrase is important, just as he had done before. Daniel did not start praying to make a political point. He did not suddenly become more devout to provoke a confrontation. He simply continued doing what he had always done, 3 times a day, every day, facing Jerusalem, he prayed. He could have closed the windows. He could have prayed silently in a room with no windows where no one would see. He could have quietly skipped his prayers for 30 days and resumed afterward. No one would have known. But Daniel understood something. If he hid his faith now, in this moment of pressure, it would mean that his devotion to God was conditional. It would mean that his prayers were something he did only when it was safe and convenient. And for Daniel, that was not an option. So the windows stayed open and the prayers continued. The conspirators, of course, were watching. They found Daniel praying and asking God for help, exactly as they expected. They hurried to the king. "Did you not sign a decree," they said, "that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, shall be thrown into the lion's den?" The king confirmed it. Then they dropped the hammer. "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was deeply distressed. The scriptures say he was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to find a way to save him. Darius tried everything. He looked for loopholes. He consulted his legal advisors. He searched for any way to undo what he had done. But the conspirators pressed him. "Remember, your majesty," they said. "According to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." The trap had sprung. The king, who held absolute power over millions of people, was powerless to save the one man he trusted most. With great reluctance, Darius gave the order. Daniel was arrested and brought to the lion's den. Before Daniel was thrown in, the king said something that reveals just how deeply Daniel's faith had impressed him. "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Think about those words. The king, who had signed a decree making himself the only object of prayer, was now expressing hope that Daniel's God would perform a miracle. Even Darius, a pagan king, could see the reality of Daniel's relationship with God. Daniel was lowered into the den. A stone was placed over the opening. The king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that nothing could be changed regarding Daniel's fate. Under normal circumstances, that was a death sentence. Lions are apex predators. A man thrown into a den of hungry lions would be dead in seconds. There was no natural way Daniel could survive the night. The king went back to his palace, but he did not sleep. He did not eat. He refused any entertainment. He spent the entire night pacing, waiting, hoping against hope. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the den, surrounded by lions, Daniel was experiencing something the king could not have imagined. We need to pause here and think about what this situation actually looked like. A lion's den in the ancient world was typically a large pit or underground chamber, sometimes carved into rock, sometimes constructed from stone. Royal courts kept lions as symbols of power and as instruments of execution. These were not zoo animals fed on a regular schedule. These were kept hungry to ensure that any sentence carried out in the den would be swift and brutal. Daniel was an old man at this point. He had been in Babylon since his teenage years, decades of service to kings, decades of wisdom and counsel, and now he was sitting in the dark with predators circling around him. He could hear them breathing. He could hear their claws on the stone floor. He could feel their heat in the confined space. And yet the outcome tells us something about what that night was really like. Daniel later said that God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. Whatever happened in that den, Daniel was at peace. Perhaps he prayed through the night, the same prayers he had been praying 3 times a day for his entire life. Perhaps he slept, trusting that the same God who had been faithful to him for decades would be faithful through this night too. We do not know the details, but we know the result. At the first light of dawn, Darius got up and ran to the lion's den. When he reached the den, he called out in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And from the darkness of the den came a voice, a calm, steady voice. "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed. He gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. When Daniel emerged, every official present could see the miracle for themselves. Not a scratch on him, not a wound, not a single mark. He was completely unharmed because he had trusted in his God. Darius then turned his attention to the men who had conspired against Daniel. By the king's command, they were thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. Before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed their bones. The same lions that had spent an entire night with Daniel and never touched him. The impact of that night rippled across the entire empire. King Darius wrote a decree and sent it to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout his kingdom. "I issue a decree," the king wrote, "that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." The same king who 30 days earlier had made himself the only lawful object of prayer was now commanding his entire empire to reverence Daniel's God. Daniel's faithfulness, tested in the most extreme way imaginable, had resulted in a pagan king proclaiming the sovereignty of the God of Israel across the known world. The scriptures tell us that Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. The man who had been thrown into a pit of lions was now more influential than ever. But Daniel's story does not end with his rescue from the lions. Throughout his life, God gave Daniel a series of extraordinary visions that stretched far beyond his own time. These visions, recorded in the second half of the book of Daniel, are some of the most detailed and debated prophetic passages in all of Scripture. In the first year of Belshazzar's reign, before the fall of Babylon, Daniel had a vision of 4 great beasts rising from the sea. The first was like a lion with the wings of an eagle. The second resembled a bear, raised up on one side with 3 ribs between its teeth. The third looked like a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, and the fourth beast was terrifying and dreadful, with iron teeth and 10 horns, different from all the beasts that came before it. Each beast represented a world empire. This vision paralleled Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue, but from a different angle. Where Nebuchadnezzar saw gleaming metals, Daniel saw wild beasts. The divine perspective and the human perspective on the same empires looked very different. What appeared majestic and powerful from a human viewpoint looked predatory and destructive from heaven's viewpoint. But the vision did not end with the beasts. Daniel also saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. This figure approached the Ancient of Days and was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion was everlasting, a dominion that would never pass away, and his kingdom would never be destroyed. For centuries, Jewish and Christian scholars have seen this passage as a direct reference to the coming Messiah. Later, in the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign, Daniel had another vision. This time, he saw a ram with 2 horns standing beside a canal. The ram charged westward, northward, and southward, and no animal could stand against it. Then a goat with a single prominent horn came from the west, crossing the entire earth without touching the ground. The goat attacked the ram, shattered its 2 horns, and trampled it. But at the height of its power, the goat's great horn was broken off, and 4 horns grew in its place. An angel explained the vision to Daniel. The ram represented the kings of Media and Persia. The goat represented Greece. The great horn was its first king. When that horn was broken and 4 replaced it, 4 kingdoms would arise from his nation, but not with his power. The details in this vision were so specific that they described events that would not occur for another 200 years, including the rapid conquests of a Greek king whose empire would be divided into 4 parts after his death. Perhaps the most studied of all Daniel's prophecies is the vision of 70 weeks, recorded in the 9th chapter of the book of Daniel. Daniel had been reading the prophet Jeremiah and understood that the desolation of Jerusalem would last 70 years. He turned to God in prayer, fasting, and repentance on behalf of his people. In response, the angel Gabriel appeared and gave Daniel a prophecy of 70 sevens or 70 weeks. This complex prophecy provided a timeline pointing toward the coming of the Anointed One, the Messiah, and events connected to the history of Israel. Scholars and theologians have debated the details of this prophecy for centuries, but its place in both Jewish and Christian understanding of history is deeply rooted. In his final recorded visions, found in chapters 10 through 12, Daniel received detailed revelations about conflicts between future kingdoms, with specific references to wars between the king of the north and the king of the south. These chapters describe political and military events with a precision that has fascinated historians and theologians alike. These visions establish Daniel as one of the major prophetic voices of the Hebrew Scriptures. His words provided direction and hope for the Jewish people during the exile and in the centuries that followed, and they became a foundational text for understanding how God works through history. Jesus himself referred to Daniel by name when speaking about future events, giving additional weight to the prophet's words. Daniel's story spans roughly 70 years. He entered Babylon as a teenager and served under at least 4 kings across 2 empires. He interpreted dreams that terrified monarchs, survived a night in a den of hungry lions, and received visions that shaped the way people understood God's plan for the world. Think about the sheer scope of what this one man lived through. He saw Jerusalem fall. He walked as a captive into Babylon, the greatest city on earth. He stood before Nebuchadnezzar and told him the meaning of dreams that no one else could touch. He watched his 3 closest friends walk into a furnace and come out without a burn. He told Nebuchadnezzar that madness was coming, and it came. He read mysterious writing on a palace wall and pronounced the end of an empire on the same night it fell. He survived a den of hungry lions when his enemies were certain he would die, and through all of it, he never wavered. When you step back and look at the whole arc of his life, a few things stand out. First, Daniel was consistent. He did not have one set of principles for easy times and another for hard times. Whether he was choosing vegetables over royal food as a teenager or keeping his windows open in prayer as an old man, his faithfulness to God never wavered. His enemies could not find a single inconsistency in his character, even after decades of searching. That kind of consistency is rare, and it is powerful. Anyone can be faithful when things are going well. Daniel was faithful when things were at their worst. Second, Daniel served with excellence. He did not just do his job, he did it better than anyone around him. Under Babylonian kings and Medo-Persian kings alike, he stood out because of his competence, his integrity, and his wisdom. His faith did not make him withdraw from the world, it made him more effective in it. He did not use his beliefs as an excuse to disengage from the culture around him. He learned the language, studied the literature, mastered the systems of government, and outperformed everyone else. His faith was the foundation of his work, not a barrier to it. Third, Daniel was brave without being reckless. He knew when to speak and when to listen. He could tell a king that his reign was about to end, and he could do it with compassion rather than arrogance. When he refused the king's food, he did not make a public scene. He proposed a quiet, reasonable test. When he interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's second dream, the one about the tree being cut down, he did not deliver the bad news with satisfaction. He genuinely wished the dream applied to someone else. He stood firm on his convictions, but he did not go looking for fights. Fourth, Daniel cared about people. He asked for his friends to be promoted alongside him. He counseled Nebuchadnezzar with genuine concern, urging him to change his ways and avoid the judgment that was coming. He served kings from nations that had conquered his own people, and he served them faithfully. He did not hold grudges. He did not carry bitterness about his exile into his work. He gave his best to every king he served because he understood that ultimately he was serving God. Fifth, Daniel prayed. This might sound obvious, but it is the thread that runs through everything. When he needed God to reveal Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he prayed. When the decree banned prayer, he prayed. When he was in the lion's den, we can be certain he prayed. Prayer was not an occasional activity for Daniel. It was the rhythm of his life, 3 times a day, every day, facing Jerusalem. It was the practice that kept him connected to God through every crisis, every promotion, every change of government. His experiences, from the food test in his youth to the lion's den in his old age, each carried the same lesson. The God of Israel is real, he is present, and he is faithful to those who trust him. Daniel bet his life on that belief over and over again, and every time God showed up, kings rose and fell, empires crumbled, the political landscape shifted repeatedly beneath Daniel's feet. But through it all, one thing remained constant. Daniel's God was in control, and Daniel knew it. That is the story of Daniel. A young man torn from his home, carried into exile, thrown into the center of the most powerful empire on earth. And through it all, he never stopped trusting, never stopped praying, and never stopped serving the God who held his life in his hands. His story is not just ancient history. It is a blueprint for living faithfully when everything around you is uncertain. Daniel did not know what each new day would bring. He did not know if the next king would honor him or hunt him. He did not know if his prayers would be answered with rescue or with silence. But he prayed anyway, he trusted anyway. He kept his windows open, kept his knees on the ground, and kept his eyes on the God who rules above every king and every empire. If you are going through something difficult right now, if you feel like you are in a foreign land, surrounded by pressures and challenges that seem impossible, Daniel's story has something to say to you. Stay faithful. Stay consistent. Do your work with excellence, and trust that the God who shut the mouths of lions is still at work today. If this story moved you, if it challenged you or encouraged you, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. We bring you stories like this regularly, stories that dig deep into the scriptures and bring them to life.